Hello friends and welcome to Generation Pixel. I'm Stuart and today I'm going to talk about fanboys. So buckle up because I might just throw some shade. Now, being of a certain age, fanboy culture doesn't really affect me that much these days. But I have been on social media platforms a little more of late, and I came across one term in particular that was new to me and also amused me. And that very term was none other than Sony Pony. Having not been involved in console war banter for quite some time now, I thought it might be amusing if I dipped my toes back into that particular pool. You know, just to see what they're up to these days. And I'm not going to lie, it was a somewhat amusing pursuit. So for the purposes of this video, I'm going to go over the past fanboy names, the current fanboy names, and what perhaps might happen in the future. And where better to start than the past? Now, I'm not going to go all the way back to the Sega and Nintendo battles of the late 80s and the early 90s. What I'm going to do is focus on the Sony versus Xbox versus Nintendo battle. And to start with, I thought we'd go with Sony. And back in the day, Sony fans were labelled with the tag of cow. But why, I hear you ask? Well, quite simple. Rival console fans tagged Sony users with the name cow because they believed that the Sony corporation milked them, much like cattle, draining every penny they could get out of their fan base. So from cows, we move on to the Xbox fans. And the rather wonderful name the Xbox fans got was Lemmings. And why? Because Sony and Nintendo fans believed that Xbox fans would follow Microsoft anywhere, including right off a cliff. Last but not least, we have Nintendo fans, who are so delightfully named Sheep. And again, much like the Lemmings tag that Xbox fans got, the Sheep tag was merely to suggest that Nintendo fans followed the herd. They were mindless, and Nintendo could lead them wherever they wanted to. So all in all, the three tags are pretty similar. You have three animals, you have the cow, you have the sheep, you have the lemon. The sheep and the lemon because they follow blindly, and the cow, as said, because Sony liked to milk their fan base dry. Or so the rivals would have you believe. So moving on to the interesting names that we use today. I'm going to start with Nintendo, and they are delightfully tagged Nintendrones. Now, quite obviously, Nintendrones harks back to their earlier name of sheep. Drones, of course, in reference to drone bees, who have no option but to follow what the Queen says. Now, this is very similar to their previous sheep tag, because drones, in reference to drone bees, are just another hive-like mind existence who go on doing what they do purely to serve their shepherd, or in this case, their queen bee. Now, for Xbox fans, they became XBots. Not quite the follow your console over the cliff lemon, but still the XBot, signifying that Xbox fans were mindless robots who could be pre-programmed to follow Microsoft's orders regardless of what their own individuality wanted them to do. And finally, Sony. And I've mentioned this before, it's a new one. I've never heard it before and I don't quite understand it. But Sony fanboys these days seem to be referred to as Sony ponies. Now, as I've said, I have no understanding of this. If anyone watching this video does and can explain and back up those explanations with some sort of proof, please feel free to let me know. Actually, I would love for you to let me know. Now, delving down this rabbit hole of fanboys, probably the most amusing aspect of all was researching what the Japanese fan base call each other. Now, you have to remember that Japanese is both a very colourful, expressive and complex language, and they have an absolute love for wordplay, which leads to some quite remarkable names. Because of the complexity of the Japanese language, I'm going to have to revert to a slideshow for most of this, so please bear with me as I try to educate you on Japanese fanboy names. And I will start with Nintendo, aka the Pigs. Now, to start with, Nintendo fans were originally known as Nin Buddha. In other words, people outside the Nintendo fan base believed that Nintendo fans treated Nintendo, the corporation, somewhat like a god. But of course, the way it always happens with language, if one word sounds like another, it becomes another. In this case, Buddha was shortened to Buta. And I do apologise if I'm butchering the Japanese dialect. but nin buta in any case, translated quite directly as nin pig. Ergo, Nintendo fans labelled pigs. Now let's move on to the Sony fans, and the particular name that they got? Cockroaches. You heard me right, cockroaches. And this is a journey in Japanese language that led Sony fans to be named as that most disgusting and long-lived of all insects. This will take a little bit longer to explain than the pig's reference to Nintendo fans. So firstly, you have to know that Sony employees used a proxy server address that started with the word gatekeeper. Fans of rival consoles then started using the term gatekeeper to describe Sony PlayStation fans. And what happened from there was the word gatekeeper was shortened to GK. Soon the name GK Buri became popular, meaning GK-like or GK-esque. The wordplay, however, hadn't properly kicked in yet though, because unfortunately for Sony fans, GK Buri sounded a lot like Goke Buri, which quite literally translates in Japanese to cockroach. And from then onwards, Sony fans, or at least Sony PlayStation fans, were known as cockroaches. Now Xbox fans were spared the wordplay. However, they were not spared an embarrassing fanboy name. The name that they were given in Japan was Chikan. And again, I apologise if the pronunciation's off. And before I explain or translate the word Chikan, I will recount the real life situation that occurred that ended up giving the Xbox fans a rather embarrassing label. During the Xbox launch in Japan, reporters were asking people in the queue what they were buying, what they were hoping for. One of the gentlemen that they spoke to told them that he was here to buy a game. Now I will not try to pronounce the name of this game, but in short, it was an adult erotic game. And not only that, after saying that he was going to purchase said game, he said, oh yes, and also an Xbox. Of course, with this news story going live, every Xbox fan got the new name Chikan, which translated means groper. So I think the pigs and the cockroaches maybe got off a little bit lightly there. So to wrap this video up, I decided, you know what, I'm going to give some fanboy names out. And here they are, as follows. For Nintendo fans, I christen thee Rutters. Rutters you ask? And here's why. Because they're all stuck in a rut, and the rut goes something like this. By Mario, by Zelda, by Pokemon, by Mario, by Zelda, by Pokemon, by Mario, by Zelda, by Pokemon, by Zelda, and on and on and on. So Nintendo fans, do yourselves a favour and get out of that rut and buy some different games. Now for Xbox fans, I'm going to dub them Twinkies. And Twinkies, I hear you ask, why Twinkies? Well, one, the entirety of the world knows what Twinkies are, but thankfully they mainly exist in the United States of America, and also they're not very good for you. And finally, for PlayStation fanboys, I'm going to rename you Ramen. And ramen you ask? Well yes, ramen. It comes from Japan, it's loved all over the world, and it's much better for you than Twinkies. Come on, I said fanboy culture didn't affect me. I didn't say I wasn't a fanboy myself. Anyway, there's one more fan base I want to annoy before I finish this video. And it's another big one. It's the PC Master Race. And all of you know, despite console fans ironically naming PC fans PC Master Race, the PC Master Race have adopted that title as their own. And to that, I applaud them. But going forward, I have a new name for you. And those of the PC Master Race, I now dub the Darwins. And why Darwins, I hear you ask? Well, that's quite simple. Because if their precious PCs don't get upgraded every 6 months, they become obsolete, extinct, and turn into fossils. And if you're still with me here, thank you very much for watching. I hope you watch more in the future. And if there's one more thing that you take away with you today, it's this: Imperial Stormtroopers can't shoot for toffee. Bye!